1. So my mum and gran used to work in the same place, a nursing home. As a child, I would hear many goings-on at the place, both told by my mum and gran. The building was originally built as a large and grand house around the 1900s, and was also a children's home at one point. Many weird things have happened to my mum, gran, and myself while going to work with them for the day. The third floor is the worst. No one likes going up there, and there are no patients up there, so it's completely silent and dark. That's where most of the unexplained things happen. Quite a few years back, the place was being renovated, still as a nursing home, just added Wi-Fi, structures, etc. Now my mum was the manager, and she decided we should go and see the place while it was being fixed on. We went with my gran and dad. It was strange being the only ones in this huge building, but everything felt fine so far. Fast forward to us looking around and talking. And we're heading up the stairs to the third floor. As we walked up them, I felt like I was being watched. Heavily watched. So I looked around for CCTV cameras, nothing. I felt a little uneasy, but sort of brushed it off. Fast forward again, and we're back downstairs in the main entrance hall. The lights were on in there, we're talking fairly loudly. Everything is fine again until my mum and I both looked down a corridor. We were at the top of the corridor, and I was looking down it. The corridor was dark, but at the end there was a light shining in from the outdoor fire exit light. My mum and I both saw something dark walk through the light. You know when you look under a door and the light is on outside, and you can see the shadow from someone walking past? Yeah, that's what we saw, but the same size as us taking up the whole corridor. I immediately panicked and burst into tears. I was only a child and didn't know what to think. I said I wanted to leave, I begged. So we did. What's strange about this is that the fire exit is to the back of the building, and the only way we were there is because my mum was the manager, and the only one with the keys. There was a locked fence and gate surrounding the whole perimeter of the building, as it was being renovated. And we locked ourselves in for the very reason of people trying to get in. This place was high security, and there were no patients inside as they had been moved until the place was finished. All in all, this was very creepy. 2. The flat I lived in was host to several paranormal phenomena that I'm not sure were due to ghosts, but maybe were some kind of mild poltergeist or interdimensional phenomenon that science doesn't know about. Yet. I still think this is what a lot of these sorts of house phenomena are, although ghosts seem like they're probably real too. This was one of my first flats, and it was the top floor of a 1920s renovated building. When I first moved in, I was stressed out most of the time, because my keys never seemed to stay where I left them. After a few weeks, I realized that they tended to disappear from any place I put them down, no matter how conscientious I was about recalling the spot. I even installed a hook by the door for my key, my first DIY project, because I was fed up of losing them. Then the landlord advised me that was a dangerous place to keep them due to the flat having a latch lock. After that, my default place to keep my keys was in the kitchen drawer. I was religious about putting them in there each time I came back home. Yet still, about 1/3 of the time they'd vanish from the drawer after I'd put them in. Then they'd reappear a few hours later. I was by then fairly certain there was a paranormal force at work, even though I'd always been a rationalist, and skeptical about ghosts and poltergeists. Anyway, one night I was talking to a friend on the phone, telling her about the incredible vanishing keys, because they'd once again gone missing from that drawer. We decided to do an experiment. I took every item out of the kitchen drawer, which was where they should have been, naming them to her down the phone as I did. I continued until the drawer was empty, no key. I put the stuff back in the drawer, naming each thing to her again as I did, to double check I hadn't missed anything. And then I went about my business, chatted, had a cigarette, and came back to the drawer about 45 minutes later. I opened it, and there was a damn key, sitting right at the front of the drawer. I was spooked. I can appreciate this experiment would have been more persuasive to the skeptics out there, if my friend had actually been there or I'd recorded it. But this was before mobile phone cameras existed. I was too broke for a camcorder, and it was dead of winter at night. So there was no way she'd come round to witness what I was doing. And anyway, I only did it to prove to myself this was really happening. I've found skeptics rarely accept supernatural events until they experience them directly. This was certainly the case for me, so I don't know if trying to prove this kind of thing to outsiders is so important anyway. The other thing was the bouncing ball I always heard from the floor above me. It sounded like someone throwing a ball at the floor, letting it bounce, 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 until it slowed down and stopped. This would happen not every night, but always at 11 p.m. Too late for a kid to be playing, but I thought maybe someone was in the crawlspace adjacent mine, playing ball for mysterious reasons of his or her own. One night, the landlord came round and I grilled him about it, asking if someone might be in my crawlspace or the one next to it, and why they'd be playing ball there at night. He said it was impossible for 2 reasons. One, my crawlspace was only accessible by the ceiling hatch in my hallway, and 2, it was a crawl space, too small for anyone to stand up in, probably even a child. That and the odd timing of the sound and the missing keys convinced me that this bouncing ball was yet one more inexplicable phenomenon. To be honest, I didn't want to know more about it and tried to ignore it from then on. I'd go out and get drunk. There was also a rocking chair in the corner of my living room, and no, it did not rock on its own like a ghost was sitting in it, surprisingly enough. But I did always feel that someone was sitting in it, to the point that I expected to see someone in it if I glanced at it out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't see anyone there, but really felt like someone was there, and just about to get up or speak. Do you know the feeling you get when you're in a room with a roommate? You're both reading something, and you suddenly become aware the roommate's about to get up, like a mood shift in the air. It was like that constantly. Totally spooked me. I didn't last long in that flat, but I have been a believer in the paranormal ever since. Though I guess I should chalk it up to some sort of educational experience. It would be interesting to hear if any of you have theories about what causes things like this to happen in so many people's homes. 3. Just thought I'd tell you about a slightly weird experience that I'd had. I go for a walk late every night around my local neighborhood. I generally stick to the same route and, close to the end of my walk, it takes me through a churchyard. It's a large Victorian church made of smooth red brick. There's a walled, grassy garden surrounding it with trees and a few plaques and benches for people whose cremated remains have been scattered there. But no graveyard as such. Although the general area is fairly residential, the church is immediately surrounded by a large schoolyard, a bowling green and a park, so it feels very isolated and quiet at night. Because of this, I normally trot through the churchyard at quite a brisk pace. However, some nights when I get there, there's a small black cat waiting for me. When the cat follows me into the churchyard, I don't feel spooked or nervous, like I usually would at all. Sometimes I lie in the grass with her in the very early hours, and she gets a stroke while I watch the clouds over the stars. It's very odd how the whole atmosphere of the place seems to change when that little cat is there. Some nights when I'm out walking, I'll snap a long twig from a hedge along the way and swish at the nettles and what have you. Last night, I'd found a beauty, a 4-foot, almost bamboo-like stick from something that had flowered and died back earlier in the season. I'd gone out particularly late, around 3 a.m., and it was getting chilly, so right outside the churchyard, standing around 2 feet from the gate, I stopped for a moment to zip up my hoodie. I popped the stick under my arm while I did so, like a sergeant major's pace stick, so that around half was sticking out the back. A few seconds later I got a huge shock as my upper body was pushed around by a quarter turn by something applying a sideways force to the section of the stick poking out the back. It felt exactly like a person had grasped it in their hand and pushed it to my right. I quickly turned this way and that, but there was no one near me. I was pretty close to panicking, My heart was racing and my breathing very fast. I tried to calm myself and slow my breathing, and as I did, I noticed a blue glow coming from a parked car around 20 meters away, parked at the side of the road. It was difficult to see anything. The street is illuminated by well-spaced sodium lights, which are partly obscured by foliage at this time of year. I took a few steps closer to the car, straining my eyes in the orange light, and the shape of a man in the driver's seat suddenly became apparent. As I stared, he stepped out of the car and, looking straight at me, took a couple of steps in my direction. He was white, looked around 60 years old, was almost completely bald on top with short grey hair, partly over the top and around the sides, and was wearing metal-rimmed glasses, a plain shirt and dark trousers. I was already really spooked by the stick incident, so I said to myself, sod this, turned on my heels and walked quickly into the churchyard. I heard him say a couple of words I couldn't make out. Then the door slammed and his engine started. When I got to the other side of the yard, I could see that he'd driven around the block and was now on the same side as me. I was almost home, but I didn't want him following me there. So I set off in the opposite direction with him slowly coming after me. I was trying to walk nonchalantly, but I was terrified by now. I crossed a park ahead of me, and again he drove around to the side I emerged on. One corner of the park dips and leads to a footpath, which is almost invisible to see from the road, as it goes downhill and is surrounded by trees. I've always been a pretty decent runner, but my God, I set a personal best as I switched to a sprint, and headed for that corner with him driving down the street towards me. The path is a shortcut into a housing estate, which would take a good 5 minutes to get to by road. So I walked through in what I hoped was an unpredictable fashion, switching between streets and cutting down alleyways, until I was sure I wasn't being followed, and then made my way home. I really don't know what to make of any of this. I went out again tonight, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. But I did see my little cat again. 4. I should start by saying that I've never had anything really paranormal happen to me, besides one time when I lived in an old house in upstate New York, where my mom and I heard footsteps going up and down the basement stairs. We called the cops, and no one was in the basement. That's where my experiences end, until today. I live in Brooklyn. My car needed an inspection, so I went to a shop in Red Hook. By the way, best mechanic I've ever been to, but that's beside the point. I walk up the street to a bench to wait out my car inspection, and I decide to call my aunt, which I do frequently. I notice that Greenwood Cemetery is right up the street. Greenwood is a huge cemetery, and also home to the location of the Battle of Brooklyn, a Revolutionary War battle. It was the number 2 most visited nature site in the 1800s and the turn of the century, second only to Niagara Falls. I've always wanted to go there, as it was beautiful and used as a public park. The guy calls me back about the car. I put my aunt on hold, and I'm told my car will be ready in 2 hours. Cemetery, here I come. I walk around speaking to my aunt on the phone for about an hour, reading old graves aloud to her and just marveling at how beautiful the cemetery actually is. No wonder, I say to her, that people pay $17,000 to be buried here. As the end of my 2 free hours winds down, I decide to get up from the bench I was sitting on at the top of one of the many hills. The best thing is I can see exactly how to get out of here, I say to my aunt, as I make my way down the hill. I start complaining about how steep the hills are. She makes a joke about me not getting locked in and making sure the gates are still opened, because this actually happened to someone she knew in the same cemetery. Suddenly, out of literally nowhere, there's a shushing sound, like someone is telling us to be quiet. Immediately after, hundreds of disoriented voices, all unintelligible, speaking at the same time. To say I was shocked and confused was an understatement. Neither of us could hear each other anymore, just the distorted voices interrupted occasionally by a rather crisp and clear shh, like someone was telling us to be quiet. I listened for a good long time, thinking maybe it's cell phone interference. There were so many voices at the same time, and they were so distorted, so unearthly sounding. I'm getting chills thinking about it. Then I would confidently say, this was definitely not that kind of cell phone interference. I listened for at least 2 minutes, just trying to understand at least one voice, to no avail. Let me say I'm a pretty big skeptic, but this was something I can't explain, something that rattled me pretty badly. 5. My flatmates and I moved into a gorgeous house 2 months ago. Roughly 2 weeks in, we started hearing footsteps in the hall and on the front porch. We are in close proximity to the neighbors, but I doubt it's them we're hearing at 3 and 4 and 5 a.m. Since moving in, I feel like I'm being watched when I'm in the shower. Just over 2 weeks ago now, I was laying in bed watching videos on my phone, when I felt something tugging at my charger cable. We don't have any pets. Ever since that, things have gotten progressively worse for me. I hear muffled voices outside my room at night. Granted, I'm the sleepout, but I've checked on plenty of occasions and there's no one there. I can't hear anything from the neighbors either. I know we're not meant to talk dreams, but if I'm home, they've been sexual in some way, though never with my boyfriend. And I wake up feeling guilty. If I'm at my boyfriend's, though, they're about being chased or messed up houses with traps, and not being able to get away. When I'm home, I wake up with bruises that I didn't have before I went to bed on my thighs, both inner and outer, and on my upper arms just blotches of bruising. Admittedly, I can be clumsy at times, but I always know if I've hurt myself. I pulled an all-nighter just over a week ago to get some work done for a website that's launching soon. I saw someone's head and shoulder around the corner from the dining room. This would have been maybe 5:30 to 6 a.m. Only one of my flatmates was awake. I asked if it had been him, maybe about to turn the lights off because he thought no one was in there. I always have music playing, but this time I was using my headphones, so I could have it up loud and not wake everyone else up. He had his door open, but he hadn't left his room since he'd made coffee at maybe 3 a.m. 2 other flatmates were both asleep with doors firmly shut. If it had been one of them, this flatmate would have heard their doors. Old-fashioned with no turnable handle, just a latch at the top and bottom of the doors. Last week I went to pull the lounge curtains because of glare on the TV. I had my door open to air my room out because I'd been away for a few days. I saw the palm of an androgynous and ambiguous bluish hand waving at me from the doorway. The lounge windows always look straight onto the sleepout. I told my flatmate, and he said we were going to go check it out. We stepped into my room and were instantly freezing, breathing fog and all. It doesn't feel like my room anymore, it just feels wrong. Last night I decided I was sleeping on the couch in the lounge, but come roughly 5 a.m., just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard something tapping at my keyboard. All of our computers are in the lounge, or we would never see each other because of work schedules. I was the only person in the lounge, and as previously mentioned, we don't have pets. My computer was off though, so I couldn't see anything. Now, however, it is staying on at night with a blank document open. I know that there's some things I'm forgetting, but I'm too tired to try and remember them right now. I don't want to end this sounding like a stupid story, but I can't sleep right now because I heard a knocking at my bedroom window maybe 15 minutes ago. 4 rather heavy raps at the window to the attached bedroom. I really don't want to look. And no, I'm not going to. If it was one of my flatmates, they would have just come to the door. It's closer to the house. I don't know what to do anymore, because I'm afraid to be alone in a house I fell in love with only a few short months ago. I'm afraid to sleep, because I'm afraid to dream. I don't even like seeing my shoes and slippers lined up against the far wall. I just want my house to feel like a home again. Update. So things at the new house have still been going on, and in some respects are picking up. The day after the original post, I had left my phone on my desk while I went to the bathroom. When I came back, I noticed that my phone was half removed from the faceplate. Everyone else was either asleep or at work at this point. The majority of my flat works night or graveyard shifts. About a week later, I had gone out the front door for a cigarette. As there was a pretty decent storm blowing, and the backyard offers no protection in a southerly, I had locked the door behind me when I came inside, because I was the only person home. Just over an hour later, I heard the front door open and close. I went out to greet whichever flatmate had come home, thinking that someone had finished work early. But I couldn't find anyone in the house. The front door was now unlocked. At about 4:30 the following morning, I was sitting at my computer in the lounge when my right shoulder got very cold. I peered sideways at my shoulder and noticed that a single strand of my hair was bouncing up and down, almost as though someone was pulling a pig's tail. I spent a couple of weeks away from home, and last night was my first night back in the house. 1 a.m. today. I went to go to the bathroom before going to bed. As I pushed open the bathroom door, I saw a black shadowy figure standing by the window. I thought nothing of it, as I was half asleep. But as I went to sit down, I noticed that the bathroom scales were going through the tarring process. These are electric scales, and have to be stepped on to turn on. But ever since the move, they have to be lifted slightly for them to register that you want to use them. After questioning the flatmates that weren't home at the time, I found that no one had been in the bathroom just previously to me. And seeing as I use the scales regularly, I know that they only stay on for approximately 30 seconds after use, or 15 seconds if not used after tarring. Midday today, so only 2 hours ago for me, I went to the loo and decided I would shower as I needed to wash my hair for the weekend. I went to get my towels and hairbrush from the sleepout, and when I came back, I went to turn the door handle to quietly close the bathroom door behind me, so as not to wake my flatmate in the next room with banging doors after his graveyard shift, only to discover that the bathroom door had been locked. I'm thankful I hadn't completely shut the door behind me not even 5 minutes previously. Seeing as it was only he and I home, I hadn't worried about locking the door while using the loo. Also, while I was showering, I noticed that a leg on the onesie that was hanging on the back of the door was sort of jerking around at odd intervals. But none of the towels or my gown, which were also hanging on the door, were moving at all. The dreams are still happening, though with less frequency while I was at my sister's place. The sleepout still feels terrible. I slept with my light on and documentaries playing on YouTube on my phone, and thankfully I haven't woken up with any new bruises in the last few weeks. I've also replaced my amethyst and bought a new rose quartz, so maybe they're helping. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 103. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Right, I just have to record the audio for 4 more videos. Of course, I'm almost at the end of my resty week by the time you guys are hearing this, but I figured I'd keep you updated on what was happening while I was working anyway. Yeah, getting it done not bad. I'm gonna quit for the night though. I need to relax a bit. I don't know what it was about today. Maybe it's just I'm more stressed, so it seems more prevalent than usual. But there were some interesting characters encountered on the internets today. Let's just leave it there. Anyway, with that I'm heading off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.